Dr. Gigi Sabbat, and you're listening in to the Walk With Me podcast. My guest today is Nina. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Gigi.
You're welcome. It's such an honor to have you here today. Now, can you start off by telling us a little bit more about you and where are you from, Nina?
Yeah, so hey, holla, Brooklyn in the house. Yeah, so I'm from Brooklyn and I have been working in education for 24 years. The last 5 years, I've been in private practice, helping people to heal, heal trauma. Yeah, using breath work and somatic experiencing. So yeah, breath is medicine.
Yes. And what inspired you to help others heal in regards to trauma?
Well, I myself am a trauma survivor, and I remember I, I think about 6 months sober because I'm an alcoholic and drug addict. I'm recovering 19 years, going strong, 19 years,
19 years.
19 years clean and sober. And so in my recovery, all of my flashbacks from my trauma from my childhood, sexual abuse, sexual assault, all of that in childhood, it all came flooding back. And so this was about 19 years ago. And so I needed the most advanced level healing for trauma because I realized I think that the addiction was really about unprocessed, unresolved trauma. And so I just fell in love with EMDR. I fell in love with internal family systems. I fell in love with the top modalities, Rosen body method. And I said, you know what? I healed myself. I think I have a gift. I mean, I'm told that I have a gift.
Yes.
A client left my office last night and we were hugging and she said something like, I just went on and on and on. And I started by saying, I don't have anything to say. So she sat down with me and she said, I don't have much to say. And then she said, I realized that, I just gushed and she said, I said something like you were unburdening. You had a lot to let go. And she said, it was you. It was you, she said. And I said, no, I'm just a witness. I'm just a safe space. So yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, tell us a little bit more about the trauma that you went through in your life.
You're brave to ask that. Um, it, Painful to talk about and painful to hear. So to those out there that are sensitive to hearing, I won't get graphic at all, but my father began molesting me at the age of 3. When my mother left him, she left him for another man, and my dad spiraled into a horrific depression where he could barely work. I understood that later in life. I pieced things together, but from the age of 3, that was when he would just in his depressive episodes, take naps with me, and he would see my brother and I separately, and it was the intention to have this time with his daughter. Fast forward, my mom was a single mom. When I was 5, she was still with this man, but at the age of 5, she was, even though she was with this other man, we were always just really poor. And there was this program for inner city children called the Fresh Air Fund. Not even sure if I'm allowed to say that, but okay, I said it.
It's all right.
So my mom signed me up for this, program for inner city, poor inner city kids to get out into the country. So I was there. So at 5 years old, I went to this house, and unimaginable, unspeakable things happened to me for the 2 weeks that I was there that are just so horrific. Different men, and unfortunately, rape was involved in that trauma. Those horrific, unspeakable. It's really the way to describe that. Unspeakable, because who would do this to children?
Right.
And I came back from those 2 weeks and I am processing this in therapy. And it's interesting, I'm really just now beginning to process a lot of this. Believe it or not, I couldn't handle I just became addicted after drugs and alcohol, to shopping, to food, to other things. I just couldn't. And it's only now that I'm starting to really be sober enough to finally talk about things. But one of the things I remember was sharing with my therapist of 7 years when I moved to Florida. That was one of the first things that I did, was get a therapist, a trauma therapist. And I said to her, I remember walking into the house and trying to tell my mother, but the shaking and crying, I couldn't breathe. when I was trying to unburden this, I couldn't breathe, and my unprepared, mentally ill, she was herself mentally ill, never called one time while I was there for the 2 weeks, by the way, never checked on me, never interviewed the family. There was nothing. It was like, we trust this government agency, sent me there. And the shaking, I couldn't breathe, and it was so horrific that my mom went, because like terrified to see her child in that state. And so she responded with this, and I got so terrified, I never said a word. I never told her what happened, because she was like, stop it, like, and the story was never told. I mean, as an adult, I had flashbacks when I sobered up from drugs and alcohol. But I was about 14 years old when I was mandated into weekly counseling sessions from the school, who noticed that clearly there was something wrong with this child who was bouncing off the walls. I was probably, sharing sexual kind of, whatever. I can only imagine at 14. And it's been very challenging. I think that survivors, especially when it comes to violent rape as a child, we don't hope the same, we don't breathe the same, we don't dream the same, we don't move the same. It's just, there's something that sets into the central nervous system where, driving isn't the same for me. I drive, and then pulls up next to me a cop car, and it's like, I can barely drive because, oh, they're officers, authority, restraints. Oh, what does that remind me of? You know what I mean? So it's like this constant being thrown back into on a daily basis. And I think that is, in the work that I do, the therapy that I've gotten, one of the biggest takeaways is that trauma is stored in the body, and it's not a memory, it's a re-experiencing. The similarity between like a getting really excited and laughing, and the sensation of excitement gets paired with danger, because so it's.
Yes, and how would you say that it's affected your relationships? I know you mentioned what happens when you're driving and you see some officers, but what about your personal relationships and eye contact of that nature? And how is your eye contact now with folks?
Well, it's interesting. I just began, as I said, I wasn't willing to process even after I was sober. Like,
Right.
one of the things that I noticed is I'm able to make more eye contact,
I
because
see that.
yeah,
It's awesome.
and it's really recent. It's interesting to say that it's very recent that I've just decided to really talk about it, because people have to understand. I'll never forget, I was sitting at the Shabbos table with a friend of mine, and we were talking about her father being a survivor or her father, the grandfather, I forget the details, but a survivor of Auschwitz. And I said, the stories must have been horrific. And she looked at me and she said, there were no stories. Survivors don't talk. We don't talk, we don't feel, and we don't. There's one more to that, but and so this is what happened to me. I still was reluctant to talk. So the shame was so crippling. So in relationships, the self-hatred, the shame, the abandonment, because my mom abandoned me emotionally. So there's such an abandonment wound that if I don't get that, if I'm in a love relationship and I don't get the call back, or if I perceive my partner as withdrawn emotionally, or on any level, there's a terror that fills me that, for me, I get angry. So it makes, I'm very borderline, but I'm a reformed borderline. So now I can be like, okay, there's a sensation, it's coming up. Okay, what's happening right now?
Yes.
So I can check in and investigate rather than react.
Very good. And as a sexual assault survivor myself, my heart goes out to you. And we are both advocates, you and I. And so it's such an honor to serve alongside you and not only raise awareness, but educate others about sexual assault. So, and I'm so proud of you for sharing your story today. Thanks so much. You talk about abandonment as well. What message do you have for an individual who has gone through something similar as far as sexual assault and abandonment?
Find safe people and allow yourself to grieve. There's such a powerful correlation between allowing ourselves to tell our story, and we have to tell it over and over. That's okay. So safe people don't say, you talked about this already 3 times. They don't do that. They understand that survivors, that it's a process, right? It's a process. Like, you're still in therapy all of your life like that. They're not realizing that it takes people a very long time to open up. And so my best advice would be to There's music that you can put on that evokes and opens up the heart space and allows that sadness. Imagine if you lost a 5-year-old child. Would you say, oh, okay, I grieved enough. I talked about this enough. I've got to move on. That's the biggest mistake that we make with people is you have to let go. It's time to let go. It falls away. It all falls away when we've told the story long enough. There's no energy into like, you need to let go. It's kind of the worst advice I think we can give people in a lot of ways, because we're not understanding. It's not a trauma responsive, trauma informed perspective.
Yes.
So when you allow yourself to grieve enough, and then guess what happens? You don't need to let go of it. It becomes this testament, this honoring of what you went through, this strength, this victory dance every day of your life. Look at what I survived. Look at what I victored over. I triumphed over. And but again, going back to the idea of that 6-year-old child losing a 5-year-old child, you have to rock that. You have to locate where in my bed. This is the most modern neuroscience is about parts work, for example, right? EMDR. So with parts work, it's where in my body is this stored?
Yes.
Where is it? So locating, and that takes practice. That's not just like, okay, I'm going to do that, right? It's actually a lot of on the front end preparation, feeling safe, questions. And I did IFS for 12 years in New York where I'm from, and then EMDR for 18 years. But anyway, when I tell people that it's kind of scary, I think to some people, like, are you kidding me? That long? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it takes that long to heal when there is that level of betrayal trauma, right?
Yes.
And also my mom was just horrific. I'm not going into the other details of the other things that happened with her, but the attachment wounding was so severe that I was so shell-shocked that it was just addiction, next. There was no, I'm going to sit and tell a story. It took me a long time to do that. So when you locate where that part is inside, you can comfort that, soothing that part, rocking, humming, bilateral stimulation, holding, right? This went viral, this inmates being taught.
Yes. Tell me, what are you doing here?
Oh yeah. So
Hand
it's
on
a
your chest.
hands over the heart space and one hand on the
The
belly
belly.
because the heart space in the belly. Those are some of the most ideal ways to comfort those parts,
Right.
and so that gentle rock. And I teach the students. I work with a high trauma within a high trauma population of students, and once a week I teach them how to breathe and how to hold the heart space in the and it's just so powerful for them. They come back week after week and they're so curious, and they are so in our communities. We didn't learn how to soothe ourselves. We learned how to keep sort of more success, more this, more that, more clothes, more shoes, more bags, more nails, more hair. But we didn't learn how to allow all of that to fall away and really find ourselves and develop that self energy and heal ourselves. Right? Like a student said to me, we talk a lot about loving ourselves, but I don't see the roadmap. And that's what I'm about. Like, what does it mean? What are the actionable steps around? What does it look like to love yourself? What is the plan? Can we get somatic enough? Can we feel our body? Because that's the problem. The world isn't in their body. If they were in their body and doing somatic type of healing, then they wouldn't be as addicted as they are to shopping, to clothes, to this or that. They would learn how to soothe those parts and listen and talk to the parts. That's what internal family systems is about.
Yes. And speaking of addiction, what was the aha moment for you? When did you decide to end it? The addiction.
To stop using?
Yes.
My psychiatrist cut me off. He said, it was pills and alcohol. Those are my drugs of choice. There was a little dabbling in cocaine, a little bit of cannabis, but really it was like hardcore pills, Xanax, Valium, pills, and alcohol at the same time. It was the same. They both work on the same receptors the same way. And so when he said, look, it's time, like you're just addicted, you're not doing anything for you. You're just using to not go through withdrawal. And so those were some of the worst days and weeks of my life. I was weaned off because you have to be medically, otherwise you go into a grand mal seizure. But still, like, and I just kept craving more alcohol because I could go out and buy that, right? More alcohol. And I wanted to heal finally. Some part of me was like, you want to tell the story. You want to face this. But if you can imagine what happens to a child that's held down in Rita, 5 years old. It's just the shattering of the self into parts, and it gets compartmentalized, and we make a deal. We're never going to tell this didn't happen. So to open up that chamber and allow the truth to pour out.
How many years have been sober?
Daunting, 19.
19 years. Congratulations. It's amazing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What message do you have for an individual who wants to end it as well, and addiction?
We can't do it alone. That's the key. The key is that Gabor Mate, addiction specialist, Dr. Gabor Mate, the world famous speaker and developmental theorist, he says that the only thing that truly fulfills us is human connection. So you've got to attach to other humans. He also says the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. So we've got to find support groups. And this is today. You know, AA is not particularly trauma informed. I love it, I go, but we need more than that. You know, we need an attachment specialist, someone who specializes in healing, specializes in trauma. However, if it's breath worker, if it's somatic, The Body Keeps the Score, right, which is a very well-known book right now that everyone's reading. It talks about alternate methods to talk therapy, because we're not talking about trauma, it doesn't work. We're releasing trauma. That's the difference, releasing it from the body, giving ourselves permission to tell the story and grieve the losses. Because when we talk, we neck up. Dr. Kennedy says we are a neck up society. That's where we compartmentalize, but that's not where we heal. We heal in the heart space.
I love it. And what about joy? What gives you the most joy, Nina?
First of all, I dance constantly. I think that the sense of humor, the dancing is what pulled me through all this, right?
Oh.
So what gives me joy is tennis, is yoga. I do yoga 3 times a week. I try to go out dancing at least once a week. I've been dancing all my life. I did some professional dance as well. So, yeah, a lot of joy. And the kids at school, we laugh together. They think I was hysterical. It's like if they only knew. And their ears perk up when I say things like that. All of a sudden they're like my groupies when I say things like, I'm learning to love myself, because really most of my life I hated myself and blamed myself for everything that ever happened. Their ears perk up. Or when I say check in, I say, I woke up angry. I wake up angry a lot. I normalize that for these kids. And they get so curious. You're saying you feel angry, because that's shut down by parents. That's the outdated model is, be grateful. What do you have to be angry about? So they hear that. That's conditioned. They don't hear, it's okay to feel angry. It's what you do with anger. So I make sure I emphasize, but I don't act out with the anger. I process it. I locate where it is in my body, and I comfort and soothe that part, because they need a solution.
Yes. Wow. Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, what message do you have for an individual who feels stuck today?
Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for that feeling. Don't blame yourself. Locate where that stuck feeling is and unleash endless empathy. It's not your fault. Rock that part. Hum to that part. Get curious with that part. Tell me more, and what else are the only things that you should use with your parts. Are the only things that a person should use who wants to help you heal. Tell me more. What else? Obviously, there's some reframing, of course, but I mean, like, when you're, to get curious with you, to open up the heart, those are the best beginning questions, right?
Wow. I love it. Very powerful. Now, what is your best advice to the audience for walking with purpose and living a life of happiness?
Wow, our baseline is happiness. Come on, what do you mean? We don't have to work at that. It's our baseline. If I could wake up every person and shake them, you don't have to work on it. It's removing the blocks. What is hurting you in there that you haven't looked at? Because when you do, when you process and you look at that, ask anyone who's had a really powerful therapy session. Joy comes after. Obviously, some days are worse than others. Okay, but for the most part, we are creating joy and excitement and hope just because we've decided not to numb. Numbness is what creates lifelessness and lack of joy. Numbness, dissociation. Get angry. People who are depressed, I say, where's the anger? Get angry. Your depression will live. Because depression is an anger we won't permit ourselves. It's a sadness we won't permit ourselves. So the joy just springs out of allowing the other feelings. Tara Brach says it's so beautiful. It's like mud, mud, mud over that. There's a baseline of peace and joy. And that's an even better question. Think about happiness. How do we feel peace? How do we feel peace?
That's right. Very powerful. Now, do you have any last words for the audience?
I'm just so grateful to share my message. You know, people can definitely get in touch with me. I mean, I'm available for people's podcasts and connections, and I'm doing groups. So there's groups, there's group work, there's working one-on-one. I work with a lot of parents, a lot of mother and daughter or father and son. People want to heal.
That's right.
Families want to heal. And they don't, a lot of the people I work with haven't had a lot of success with traditional talk therapy. So they want a more body-based approach. That's kind of what's in style right now for a reason. The neuroscience and evidence-based research backs that.
Yes.
So it's not just a fad, you know, like.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for being a guest on the Walk With Me podcast.
You're
God bless.
welcome.
You all have a great day.